Hello fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Alright, I'm going to continue talking about The House on the Borderland by William Hope Hodgson today. I did a video a couple of days ago that is a review that also talks about the beginning of the novel. In order for you to jump in and understand what's going on, you should probably go back and watch that video. I broke this novel into parts, for instance, I cut off the preface and the afterword because that's the frame story of this that is written by the two fishermen that find the manuscript. The manuscript is what this novel really is. So part one of this manuscript that I go over in the first video is this kind of hallucinatory astral projection cosmic journey that our narrator goes on. And the most interesting thing about this is he couches this in the language at the beginning of a haunting. He lives in a haunted, cursed house, and nothing really strange or haunting occurs until suddenly one day he's just shot out of his body into space to another version of the same area, but he has to go through space to get there. And this cover is a perfect example of that. We get this negative land where the sun is a black hole with a ring of fire around it, and there's a plane with the house on it, and all these gods, some he knows, some that he doesn't know, staring down from the mountains at this house that is on the borderland between two worlds. That is part one. Part two is the Swine Things, and that I'm going to say from here on out that this is a spoiling deep read, so I will be spoiling the plot as I go through this. So part two, which is my least favorite part of this book, and I know it's many people's favorites, and that is completely okay. After this really strange, hallucinatory, astral projection, kind of cerebral beginning, he comes back, and the strangeness of the house turns into this weird attack of pig-like creatures that are trying to get into his house, like humanoid, pig-faced creatures. And a large chunk of this book is this kind of home invasion narrative as he fights off these pigmen, which for me went on a little bit and wasn't as exciting. But Jake from Pulp Mortem, who was the first person I ever saw review this book, I don't know if he's the first person on BookTube to do it, but he's the reason that I even knew of this book. I hadn't heard of it before. This was his favorite part, so I don't think that it's too long for everybody. It was a little long for me because I felt like the promise of the first part of the book, this second part was slightly less. There wasn't cosmic terror. There was what felt like almost a zombie movie, but there were pigmen instead of zombies. Anyway, there was still stuff going on that made this very exciting. And I say this slightly negative thing about the second part, but know that this is probably going to get my vote for number one for this year. This book's freaking good. So even when I say something slightly negative about it, it was incredible. I was so entertained the entire time by this home invasion section. It just wasn't my favorite part. The part that I found most interesting about the home invasion is that his sister, who is this strange second person in a novel that is really about one guy, and all of his adventures are basically isolated, but his sister is there. She lives in the house with him, and she kind of makes his meals and serves him. There's this underlying narrative where he thinks that she is seeing the same things that he is. This is just how I interpreted it. But we never see her react directly to the pigmen. In fact, there's lots of hints, I feel like, pointing towards the idea that the pigmen might be in the narrator's head. Not that they're not real, but that they're only viewable. Here's how I took it. They're only viewable by the narrator because of that cosmic journey that the house put him through at the beginning. In fact, I would even say that these pigmen could have been all around him since he first moved into the house, but he isn't able to see them until he takes this cosmic journey. In fact, the first pigman he sees is in the negative world that he travels to or astral projects to at the beginning of the novel. And then when he comes back, suddenly he can see all of these pigmen. But I don't think that his sister can. So I was having a really... The most fun I had during this part of the book was imagining what this all looked like to his sister, because she tries to leave as soon as she can, and he locks her in the room because he's like, no way can I let her out. The pig people will get her. But she seems to want to be far away from him. And they never speak. It's crazy. I don't think there's very little dialogue in this book. There is a little bit, but very little. So yeah, the whole time I was reading this, I was really thinking of this from the perspective of his sister and how weird this must look to her to see him freaking out about this home invasion that she can't see any of. Also, the house becomes labyrinthian throughout this portion, which I really enjoyed. He, of course, has to block all the windows and doors from these pigmen coming in. And one of the places that he's worried about is the, I guess, basement or cellar of this house. And the cellar of this house has room after room, and it just goes on and on until he comes to this huge cellar room that has a trap door, and he opens this trap door and it's darkness, and he throws a rock into this trap door and he never hears it hit the ground. The house keeps getting bigger and bigger. Anyway, there's this rift that is formed by his house, and it's slowly growing. It's cracking open, and he gets the idea that this is where the pigmen are coming from, is this weird rift that's formed in the plain near his house. I also want to bring up that he has a dog named Pepper, and he's out looking at this rift before all the home invasion stuff starts. Pepper gets scratched by one of the pigmen, and while the whole entire home invasion is going on, his sister, who he's locked in her room so she won't leave the house, is taking care of Pepper the dog. And Pepper the dog is one of my favorite characters in this book. It is really the story of one isolated man going through all kinds of stuff, but Pepper is there by his side through a lot of it. Incredible character. You know I love animals, and Pepper was just cool as shit. So, the home invasion section ends, and it's I think it's one big night, and then the pigmen stop coming. And that's part 2 for me of this book. I'm going to just look at my notes really quick. Part 3 is this rift that I was just talking about. This crack in the plain. This great hole. The opening of the earth that occurs releases underground water. And this pit starts filling up. But there seems to be slightly higher up this cave, and he decides this is where the pigmen are coming from, and he decides to go spelunk down into this rift and look at this cave. And man, this is creepy, scary stuff. He gets down. He can't take Pepper with him, which is unfortunate, and he gets down and he goes into this cave, and all he has is candles. And in this cave, he walks back, he finds a pit, this huge pit, and he throws a rock down, and he can't hear the bottom of it. but he realizes that the pit, if he's understanding his place correctly, is right under his house. That his house is right under this pit. And I think he hears something creepy in the pit, and then suddenly water starts flowing into the cave. It almost knocks him into the pit. Pepper shows up. He's a good boy. He saves him from the water throwing him into this pit. And Pepper, this is really Pepper's part of the book. He saves him, gets him out of that cave, because it's raining so hard and this rift is slowly becoming a lake. So he runs back to his house and goes down into the cellar again, into this labyrinthian cellar, and eventually comes to this big chamber, and he opens the trap door, and he can feel the spray of this huge cavernous hole filling with water, and he realizes that this is right underneath his house. My camera died, so I'm gonna have to stop here and charge it up a little bit more. So he realizes that this pit, that deep pit of God knows what, is right beneath his house, and this is, he feels, where all of the curse of this house is coming from. And the transition from part 3 to part 4 is really interesting. There's this little moment where he suddenly finds himself in the Sea of Sleep. And apparently this is the area of the manuscript that is the most broken apart. There's very little of this, but apparently he goes to this place called the Sea of Sleep, and while he's there, he meets a woman. This is a strange landscape, and he meets this woman who he is obviously very in love with. This part stuck out very strangely to me. I didn't quite understand this. And it wasn't till later that I really came to understand it. But anyway, then we come to really, truly, for me, the high point of this book, which I think was the low point for Jake. And that is, he is hanging out in his study, and I can't remember what initially calls his attention, but he stands up and walks to the window and looks out the window, and time starts speeding up. And it speeds up little by little. So the day speeds by, and the night speeds by, and the next day speeds by, and the next night speeds by. And this gets more and more intense as time passes, until day and night become almost a flicker as they move past. And he watches this in awe for a while, and then he turns and looks around the room, and he notices that there's this thick layer of dust around the room. And in the saddest part of this entire book, he goes over to where Pepper was laying beneath his chair, snoozing, and he touches Pepper, and Pepper falls into dust because so much time has passed. And time keeps on passing, and he actually, I think, sits down on his chair and tries to close his eyes and nap a little bit, and he gets back up, and time's going even faster, and he looks around and realizes that his chair has collapsed, and that there's an outline of dust that's a body on the floor, and he realizes that this is his own body, that he himself has also become dust. And we go on a journey with the Earth and the Sun and all the other planets as they slowly die and become rogue wanderers of the solar system. And Jake, in his review, says this is 50 pages. And he's right. This is 50 pages. And I was never once bored. I read this in awe. This is like prose poetry that is so incredible. This is the greatest description I've ever seen of the end of our Earth, our sun, our solar system. It's incredible. As I was reading, what it reminded me of is the end of 2001 Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick's film, where we see this astronaut surrounded by all these monoliths, and then we get a visual representation of him being evolved quickly by all these monoliths around him. And it's just this journey of sound and sight. This is the book equivalent of that. Like this is some of the best prose I've read in a really long time. Just really beautiful. Easy to read, but strange, deep journey. Really incredible. Probably my favorite part of this book. I had so much fun on this weird vision quest that this guy goes through. And it's hard because if you think about the story so far, you've got this weird cosmic journey at the beginning that is hard to describe, but it shows that his house is right on the border between two different places, two different worlds. And then you've got a kind of straight story of these pigs coming from an underground cavern that link the two worlds and are trying to invade his home, followed by a link of him figuring out the link between these two worlds is this pit underground, and the heroic story of Pepper the dog coming to save his master. And then suddenly you get a vision quest, and I know that a lot of people will probably have trouble with this part. I'm sure I'll get comments as people read this going, I couldn't agree with you on how well that ending works. And I understand that. Narratively, it's very strange. Like, what is the point? What does this have to do with the story? For me, this is the cosmic horror that the house demonstrates. This house, the way that it haunts is that it randomly kicks this guy into astral projecting to other places and other parts of the universe, and the terror, the horror of the knowledge of what the earth, what humanity will look like when it dies, what the earth will look like when it dies, what the sun will look like as it roams throughout, the universe dying. All of that weight is brought down onto this one character, and it reminded me a little bit of the Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, where when people take this specific drug, the drug itself allows people to become kind of astral project through time and see different parts in time, but the trip lasts so long you never know when it's going to be over. Yeah, and it felt a little bit like that to me. This unbreakable quest where all he can do is look, and he gets so far out into the universe that eventually he ends up back on the Sea of Sleep, I think it was called, and this woman that he loves is there again, and they hold each other. It's beautiful. It's the one part of the book that sticks up a little bit for me, sticks out a little bit for me, is kind of strange, but I realized as I was reading the last part that I think William Hope Hodgson put it in there as a reason that he doesn't leave the house. Because, of course, that's one of the things that that we wonder as a reader, and I don't often. I'm trained by horror movies that they have to stay for the story to happen. But one of the complaints that could be brought against this story is, why the hell would anybody stay in this house? And he stays there because he knows that the strange qualities of that house are the only way that he can see this strange universe woman that he's in love with. After this vision quest, he returns to his own time. Unfortunately, my favorite hero in the story, Pepper the dog, does not return. Pepper is gone. And our narrator gets another dog, but he loved Pepper so much that he didn't want to get another dog, but he knows that he needs a dog to protect against to tell him when the pig people are coming. So he gets this other dog, and he won't let the dog in the house. It has a little dog house that it stays outside in. And the narrative continues on as if this whole vision quest never happened. There's a new pigman monster that attacks. This one is it seems like the main, I guess we could call it the boss of the pigmen. And this is the main horror that was in this pit. And all we see of it is that it wounds the dog. And at night, the wound of the dog glows in the dark. And he gets a scratch on his hand, and the dog licks him. And the dog has been wounded by this terrifying creature that we don't really get to see much of. And then the infection, the glow-in-the-dark infection of this wound passes to our main narrator. And then we assume that it kills him. And we go back to the two men that are reading the manuscript. This isn't a novel that people know about. I know that people that really love reading and especially love old weird tales and stuff like that, this is popular amongst that group. But if you just go to a regular area and say, hey, have you heard of William Hope Hodgson's The House on the Borderland? Not many people will know, but it is really interesting. And a lot of people have looked back at this specifically, the historical significance of this novel coming out so early, that it's kind of one of the first steps that people took away from the Gothic novel structure, which was so popular at the time. Of course, this had a huge impact on H.P. Lovecraft and a lot of the weird fiction that came after it. It is the most glacial cosmic horror I've read. This is very, very thin book, but it is not a thin read. Just that 50-page cosmic journey, I took that really slow and really enjoyed all of that. So much happens in such a small page count. It really is incredible. This was way ahead of its time. In fact, as I read this, I started thinking about this. This is Mark Z. Danilewski's House of Leaves, which I read in, I think, somewhere between 2003 and 2006, and really enjoyed half of. I really liked the found manuscript in this. That was the story of a documentary of a couple whose house is getting bigger on the inside than it is in the outside, and it ends with them spelunking into closets and that kind of stuff. This felt like, to me, an idea so new that it didn't really exist before. But as I was reading this, I realized it absolutely did exist before. I absolutely believe that Danilewski had read and probably been inspired by House on the Borderland for his House of Leaves. They're not exact, but they both are found manuscripts. They are about liminality and houses. There's so much similar going on, in my opinion, that I can't help but think that this was inspired by this. And I will say, for me, this is better. This is better by leaps and bounds. Really, really incredible story in the house on the borderland. I don't know what else I can say about it. Go get it, read it. I was reading it in this Ace book, but this Ace book is in very good condition. No creases on the cover or anything like that. But holding it open and reading these small print was impossible. So for the first time in a long time, I read this one on Project Gutenberg. I just opened the document and read it on the computer. I hate reading on the computer. I really, truly prefer reading the actual object of the book. But in this case, I didn't want to hurt this Ace in any way. And it was just too small of print, and I couldn't open far enough to really read it. So I read it on Project Gutenberg. I'm sure there's an Audible version of this somewhere. I'm sure that even Horror Babble probably did it at one point. I mean, it is a classic in this specific genre. Yeah, it was. What a read. Thanks for pointing me in this direction, Jake. Seriously, what a read. This is like the poster book for this channel. This is the kind of weird that I really love, and boy, was it a good time. All right, that's all I've got for this. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.